Kids' desks should be functional, but who says they can't also be fun? I built these nature-inspired desks for my kids to do their schoolwork. They feature an epoxy lake or pond spilling over a waterfall edge. Basically, the desk is a cabinet with 2 pieces of wood attached to it. I'm going to give you an idea of how this thing is built, but stick with me for just a second while I show you how to make everything a lot more difficult for yourself. So 4 years ago, I got these slabs from a maple tree freshly cut down by my arborist father, who will probably not like this clearly awesome lumberjack-esque photo. We hauled those crazy heavy slabs up to the upper story of my brother and sister-in-law's barn, where they baked for the next few years, then air-dried them for 2 more weeks. Then it was back to my shop, where I flattened them using a router and homemade flattening sled setup that left a veritable mountain of sawdust. I rough cut the pieces for the top and side portions of the desks, then resawed them on my bandsaw into more manageable thickness. Finally, I straightened the edges and glued them up into panels, and at long last had the usable pieces for the desks. Of course, another route would be to go buy previously dried and dimensioned wood, thus saving about 7,548 hours of labor, but to each their own. I used my x-carve CNC by Inventables to carve the sunburst pattern for the cabinet portion door, as well as for the waterfall and pond features that would later be filled with epoxy. Those files are available on the Inventables site for free use, and I'll include a link in my post about this project. While the robot worked, I cut the cabinet sides. I chose to 45-degree these joints as I don't particularly care for end grain. I also chose to save the maple and cut the panels from maple plywood. Honestly, I don't have a lot of footage of this, but basically, it's a box. I cut a face frame for the cabinet from maple wood and glued it to the plywood. The sunburst panel door fits within the frame and can be adjusted in the file on easel. Going back to the waterfall portion of the desk, the carve is designed as a 2-stage with a larger bit hogging out the bulk, followed by a 60-degree bit to smooth it all out. That said, I was happy with how it looked after just the larger bit and chose to stop the carve after that. The goal was to leave the epoxy clear enough for the steps to remain visible. Which is where I tell you that this was my first time working with epoxy. Now, first, I will say that what I personally love about this design is that the epoxy is not filled all the way through the wood. The carve reaches a depth of 1/2 inch, creating a built-in barrier and circumventing the need to set up a dam for the pores. Also, using less epoxy, which is shockingly expensive. I sprayed on some adhesive and then filled the pond/lake/whatever you want to call it with these small rocks. It's actually inlay stone that I found at Woodcraft, intending to enhance the whole body of water thing I was going for. And after the first pour, I was pretty happy with how it looked, but wanted the water to be a bit bluer. And then I went way too far and made it too opaque. So much for that. Still, the blue was pretty. For the second desk, I wanted to go for a little more of a turquoise look because, well, let's be honest, at this point I was just playing. And I made one that was even more opaque. But my daughter came to check it out, declared it very pretty, and she was in love with it, so I decided not to sweat the small stuff. I mean, it was only like 5.5 hours of carving to create those steps, but whatever. Word to the wise, I know it's expensive, but practice just a little bit first. As you can see, the steps are somewhat visible in the darker blue epoxy, so not all was lost. I also decided to go ahead and fill the sunburst pattern with epoxy at this point as well. My original intention was to leave it as was, but the design was just a little bit than what I had originally envisioned, and the copper pigment was so pretty, so I went for it, and I actually love how it looks with epoxy. After a good 24 hours of cure time, I cut the panels to size. They were not even at the ends, so I used my track saw to even them up, and then I cut the panels to width. I sanded the boards with higher grit sandpaper. Coarser grit scratched the epoxy surface. I final sanded those to 320, and that looked good enough for me. I then cut the 45-degree edges where the lake panel joins up with the waterfall panel, and devil knows why I don't have footage of that, and then clamped the crap out of it. At this point, Frankly, I was running out of time. I needed to get the desks done before a scheduled surgery the very next morning, so I chose to do a very quick finish with linseed oil to help bring out some of the figure in the wood and shine it all up. My plan is to go back and do further finish work, but for now, they really look fine. The water section of the desk is joined to the cabinet with a simple cleat underneath. And the final product is a kid's desk, or two, that is fun, functional, and kind of freaking awesome, if I do say so myself. My kids love them, I love them, so even with some bumps along the way, I have to say I'm feeling pretty good about them. I call this design the Sunriver Desk, an homage to the beautiful place I live in. They will be used in our new school-at-home schoolroom. If you would like to build one or two, I've got the plans on my website as well as links to the easel files available at inventables.com. My thanks to Inventables for helping make projects like this possible and free to the public. You can head to their site to learn more about the x-carve machine that I use to carve this, and as always, be sure to subscribe for more DIY videos because honestly, you never know what we'll come up with next around here.